Welcome to Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater. Issues and Answers is presented as a public service to New Mexicans by State Employees Credit Union, who have been proudly serving the families of New Mexico locally and abroad since 1958. State Employees Credit Union is ready to help you and your family with all your financial goals. And now, Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater.
Welcome to the program. I'm Diane Kinderwater. Do you feel trapped like I feel trapped? A lot of us, with these stay-at-home orders that we've had through much of 2020, we felt trapped in our homes, trapped in our lives. Really nothing to do, nowhere to go. We feel trapped. But you know what? There's supposed to be a light at the end of the tunnel. We're going to get out of this feeling of trappedness. But what about if you took out a loan, a small loan that you thought you'd repay in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but you find that you're trapped in that loan because the interest rate could be as high as 175%, and you might need to take out other loans just to pay off that first loan. Well, if it's not happening to you, it's happening to a neighbor, a friend, a loved one, or the guy across the street, because here in New Mexico in 2019, there were 592,000 small loans taken out, totaling more than $66 million. And guess what? Those folks are having a hard time paying off those loans. On the show today, we're going to talk about Think New Mexico. It's their new mission, another mission. They've had a number of successes, but this nonpartisan think tank is working on educating the public and the state legislature about, hey, isn't it time to lower those rates? Isn't it time to put a cap on the 175%? Maybe lower it down to something reasonable, like 36%, while most of us are receiving on our interest rates about 0.1%. Well, anyways, there's a lot of fun facts about the fact that there are more of these small shops offering these loans than there are McDonald's, and we see McDonald's on every single street corner. So please stay with us as Fred Nathan, the executive director of Think New Mexico, is going to share everything he knows about capping these small loans here in New Mexico. Stay with us. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the program. I'm laughing because I'm so pleased to have Fred Nathan with us. He does such a great job as the executive director of Think New Mexico, and always a great guest here in the program. Thanks, Fred.
Thank you for having me back, Diane.
Happy New Year to you and your family, and happy holidays, and again, happy 2021.
To you as well.
I love this. How predatory lending swallowed New Mexico and what we can do about it. Yep, that's the predator. We know that these sharks are. New issue for Think New Mexico. It's an issue that we haven't really talked about much on this program, so I'm not that familiar. I don't take out small loans, but we have 666 million just in the state of New Mexico.
It's an enormous business, and people don't realize it. And as you point out, there's 6 times as many of these small loan shops as there are McDonald's, which seem to be ubiquitous. So it kind of gives you an idea, although they're very concentrated in lower income neighborhoods because that's the people that they prey on.
Right now they're allowed to have a loan, offering a loan of 175%. You want to cap it. Think New Mexico wants to cap it to a reasonable 36%?
That's right.
Reasonable. I'm laughing. Tell me the history of this problem, the history of loan, and I guess you're calling loan sharks?
Yeah, or predatory lenders. When it gets over 3 digits, we're really talking about predatory lending. And as you pointed out at the top of the show, it's 175% in New Mexico, which is one of the highest rates in the country. So the history is really interesting. Back in territorial days, the first bank in the Southwest was actually in Santa Fe, First National, in about 1870. And banks really didn't start emerging until about 1900. And really they focused on wealthy people and businesses. So if you were a middle-income person or a low-income person, you went to family members, you went to relatives, maybe a pawnbroker. And so fast forward, that wasn't a very good situation for most people. And in fact, we found an Albuquerque Journal editorial in 1914 that talked about this scourge of loan sharks in New Mexico, and something needed to be done. Well, it wasn't just a problem here, it was a problem everywhere in the country. And in the Midwest, they started first with usury laws at about 6%. but they weren't very effective because nobody wants to lend money at that rate, and it doesn't really compensate you for your risk. So there was a foundation called the Russell Sage Foundation that came up with a counterintuitive proposal, which is, why not make it about 36%? They got that from the pawnbrokers, which is about 3% a month times 12. Fast forward to today, and about 37 states now are in the range of 40% or less. We're in the handful of states, maybe 3 or 4, that are 100% or more. And of course, the problem with that, if you take, say, a $400 loan, which is fairly typical, for a year, at 175%, that means you're paying $700 in interest on a principal of just $400. In other words, the interest is more than the loan itself. And what happens is people can't pay that interest rate off. They don't realize how much that is. And then these companies get them to renew the loan over and over again, and then they're in this cycle of debt. But what happened was in New Mexico, a lot of people don't realize this, we did get a law through in 1947 at 36%. It worked just fine until an accident of history in 1980, and you may remember during the Jimmy Carter years with that very high rate of inflation, and the legislature just decided to abolish our usury law. And after that, the predatory loan industry flooded into the state. In the next decade, the number of those shops went up by 1,400%. So fast forward to today, and we've got 549 of these stores, 6 times more than the McDonald's. We've got one for about every 4,000 people in the state of New Mexico. That's how pervasive they've become.
Fred, who is the typical clientele for these
Usually,
small loans?
these are people who are unbanked, meaning they don't have a checking account or a savings account, or they're underbanked, meaning they don't really have a bank or a credit union. And the lending industry, the predatory lending industry, so we're talking about loans of $5,000 or less. We're not talking about banks or credit unions, which generally don't make loans in that range. And so the predatory loan industry has figured out that this is the most lucrative, the most profitable in these low-income neighborhoods. And in fact, the Center of Law and Poverty did a study and found that about 60% of these stores are located within 10 miles of a pueblo, or the reservation, and a tribal reservation. So they're really focusing on working low-income people for the most part.
And these folks, what do they need a loan for? Medical situations, medical bills, car loans?
All of the above. We profiled a woman who just needed a $100 loan to buy some firewood. This was a Navajo woman, and then just got caught up into this cycle of debt. But medical is very common, business loan, paying somebody else back. So there's, as you pointed out, there's 592,000 of these loans. Many people are not getting just one loan, they're getting multiple loans and stitching them together.
To pay off the first loan.
To pay off the first loan,
Wow.
and sometimes, let's say they need $10,000, they'll go to multiple stores and stitch it together, and then they get
What do they
sucked in.
use as collateral on these loans?
There generally is no collateral. And that's what makes them risky for the lender. And that's what they say justifies a higher rate. But in other states that have gone from very high rates, like I said, 37 states now are 40% or lower. Other states have done this. Montana, South Dakota are 2 recent examples where they had very high rates and they reduced them dramatically. And what they saw was this caused the clientele to go to credit unions. Credit unions are a terrific alternative
Which is
to
our
predatory
sponsor
loans.
for this program.
And I didn't even know that until you...
State Employees Credit Union sponsors Issues and Answers. So you're saying they're a terrific...
They're much more reasonable. In fact, credit unions were actually, if you look into the history of credit unions, they were set up by business people who were concerned about their employees and loan sharks. So this is why they exist. They're not as widespread as these small loan companies, which is part of the problem. But what happened in Montana and South Dakota was they lowered the rates, and the credit unions found that their business went up by about 25%. So that's some indication that these people are still getting loans, but they can get it at much lower rates. And in New Mexico, our credit unions are locally owned. If you look at these small loans, we had our interns study where are these companies located? Where are their headquarters? Well, about 85% are out of New Mexico. So really what we're doing is we're exporting some of that $666 million of loans. The vast majority of the profits are going out of state. If we lower the rates, that business, a lot of that's going to go to credit unions, and it stays local. So it's good for the economy. And of course, it's especially urgent now in the middle of a pandemic. People are in real financial stress. So I expect the number of loans and the amount of loans is going to go up, which is what makes it urgent that this get addressed by the legislature this year and the governor.
175%, if they need to take a loan. What would happen if the people just stop and say, you know what, you've gotten my blood, stop paying the loan? What happens to them?
Well, then the companies start calling them up, and when they apply for the loan to begin with, they're asked for references. And usually those references aren't called until they can't pay the loan back. So now their boss is getting a call, their spouse is getting a call from the loan company. So it's kind of a spiral downwards from there.
Why did Think New Mexico choose this issue to work on?
Well, we're interested in social mobility and enhancing social mobility and empowering people to better their situations. And this just seemed like such an obvious issue that needed to be addressed. And so we're promoting this. We're also promoting financial literacy, having that as a requirement for graduation.
At this point, we don't have such a thing. There are courses. I don't think when I had business math, which was a wonderful class to take to learn to balance a checkbook and to understand that. But I wish in my day, which was in the last millennium, they had such a thing, because the financial literacy is just something that it affects our lives every single day.
You're exactly right. It's actually an optional course right now, but only about 11% of high school students take it. And it's really caught on around the country. So in the last decade, 17 states, including our neighbors in Texas, Arizona, and Utah, have all made this a requirement, a semester course in either financial literacy or personal finance. So we're talking about things, Diane, like very basic budgeting, banking, savings, investing, and learning about interest rates and borrowing, because some of these kids hopefully go to college, and generally in New Mexico, they're going to have to borrow to go to school. So what we've heard anecdotally, both from the teachers and the students that are taking it, is how valuable it is to these students, that they go back and tell their teachers, this was the most important thing I learned, because as you point out,
it's real life. It's real life stuff that can, I'm not sure about calculus and about these other classes that people are taking, but this is real life stuff. Have you why did Think New Mexico choose this topic as well?
Well, you know, we've worked in this area before. We're interested in, so like last year, for example, we passed the New Mexico Work and Saves Act to address all the people in the private sector whose employer may not be able to provide a pension or a plan. And this creates, in effect, like a 529 plan, which is a way to save for college, where the government sets up the plan and people can pay in through automatic payroll deduction. And
have a tax deferred.
There you go.
That's the key, right?
And have it tax deferred, you're exactly right. And it turns out that people are much more likely to save if they can do it with automatic payroll deduction. So it's another way to sort of lift us out of poverty. This is sort of a free market solution. And the same thing with financial literacy and getting people away from predatory lenders is a way that we can build prosperity here in New Mexico.
Instead of, as you said, a lot of that $666 million going out of state. What else would you like to share with those of us who haven't gone to these predatory lenders? As we said, they're almost more than McDonald's. Other states are doing this.
The
4 out of 5, I think, four out of 5 of the loans have to be rolled over instead of paid off. That's shocking.
Right. About 80% of these loans get rolled over or renewed. And the predatory lenders are happy to do that because there's a whole bunch of fees that you pay on the front end. So they get charged again, gets rolled into another loan, and some of these people never really escape. And this was a problem with our military. Back in 2006, a lot of armed service members weren't able to qualify for their security clearance because they were in debt up to their eyeballs. So President Bush, this is 2006, working together with a Democratic Congress, was able to get through the military lending law, and they set it at 36%. So if you are right now in New Mexico, if you're making a small loan to a member of the military or their family, you can only do that up to 36%. And really all we're saying is, why don't we extend that to every New Mexican, not just those.
Protect every New Mexican.
Not protect just those in the military.
You speak about some misconceptions about having this reform, something to do with maybe credit won't be available. Will there be legitimate small loan lenders after that? And will we be able to enforce this against online lenders?
Right.
So tell me about those misconceptions about this.
So that's what the industry argues. They say if it wasn't for us, there would be nobody that could serve these people. And that's just not true. So for example, there are other alternatives. We mentioned credit unions. Actually, credit card debt, which is not something I would ever encourage anybody to do, is usually in the vicinity of 22 or 24%. So even that would be better. And
that's awful.
And that's awful. And I'm not recommending that. But if the choice is between
175, but I mean 24%.
That's right.
Work on that next. Okay, so you're saying there is some credit.
There are alternatives where people can get more affordable credit. Another thing that's grown recently is a company called True Connect, and they work with large employers, government employers, and it becomes sort of a benefit if you work for, I believe the county of Bernalillo does this, where their employees can get a small loan through True Connect of up to 8% of their paycheck, no more. These people try to be more ethical about the lending, and that's another alternative, and their rate is 36% or lower. So there are lots of alternatives out there, and here's the other thing. Some of these predatory lenders are in other states, and they're capped at 36%, and their business model is they can make money at 36%. There's another group of these predatory lenders.
So they'll probably stay here.
They'll stay here. In fact, they'll expand. But some will leave the state. We profiled one of the companies, World Acceptance Corporation. They're a publicly traded company on Wall Street, so they have to file what's called a 10K, where they have to talk candidly about what their business model is. And they explain that what they do is they just target states with high rates and low regulation, like New Mexico. They're only in 16 states. So if we were to bring the rate down to 36%,
we'll say goodbye to them.
They would leave. But some of these other lenders, Regional Finance, Opportune, One Main Financial, they would stay and they would operate at the 36% level. And they've proven, One Main is in 44 different states.
What about online? Are they saying the industry is saying that people will just resort to online lenders?
Right. That's what they say. Very, very few people borrow online. So we're talking about just a tiny fraction, not even 1%. And I think that needs to be regulated at the federal level. And I think the Biden administration is already talking about clamping down on online lending.
What about, Fred, Nathan, just free market? Let the free market happen here. If people if they want to borrow at 175% to maybe buy a big screen TV, so be it. Let them have that choice.
That's a great question. And I am a free market advocate, But here you have market failure because you have a negotiation between somebody on one side of the table who's desperate, who's unsophisticated, doesn't understand what 175% interest rate really means. And then you have a Wall Street company on the other side of the table. So actually in New Mexico, for loans over $5,000, they are unregulated. And for the most part, there's not a problem there. In fact, I've talked to bankers about this, and people when they're borrowing at that level, they're generally pretty sophisticated. Say, for example, a developer, and they'll fight tooth and nail over 1/8 of 1%. But they're different than the person who's just trying to borrow $100 to buy some firewood to keep warm in the winter, who doesn't even have a high school education. So those people are at a much greater disadvantage, and I just don't think the market really works well when you're talking about these small loans.
What other examples did you find? Did your interns maybe, again, people brought this issue to you. What are some other cases of stories? I mentioned the big screen TV that I see, but you're mentioning the woman with the firewood, where we hear cases of people having to pay emergency medical bills they didn't expect. What other cases are out there, Fred?
Usually it's around cars, I think, is a big area. They need a repair, they need a new part for their car to get to work. So they just need, $400 or $800. That's a common one. Sometimes education, mostly paying back friends or relatives. So they go to one of these predatory lenders. And the problem is they're so ubiquitous, as we were talking about earlier, one for about every 4,000 people. It's to some of these people, it's just tempting. They make it so easy for you to get the loan the first time that it's almost addictive.
Well, like a trap. They're trapped in that.
They get into a cycle of this. But, going back to, what is the solution? In addition to bringing down the rate, we should also talk more about financial literacy. And it's really exciting. I've talked to people in other states where this has become a requirement. And a gentleman in California was telling me that oftentimes what he sees is the kids learn about it and then they bring it home and they teach their parents. So not only is it a good thing to understand about interest rates and budgeting and savings and investing, it's also a strategy that can help New Mexico. We're 47th in financial literacy. I think we're close to first or second in poverty. We need strategies like this that will lift this state up. And I think the best way to do that, frankly, is through education.
Definitely.
And so much the better if we can make some of these students take this information home and teach their parents.
It's true about a high school student back in the late 70s, 80s. I remember I was saving some money. I went to a bank. I was going to save whatever it was, $100, $200, whatever, take out a CD. And at that point, the rate was maybe 16%. And I said to the woman, well, I can save it for 6 months or a year. Is 16% a good rate? She said, keep it in there as long as you can. I mean, that's why I'm saying financial literacy. I mean, I was a worker, had 3 jobs, liked money, but I didn't know what 16% meant. Was that a good savings rate? Now it's 0.01.
Yeah, you're dating yourself, because we now know that's the late 70s. When Jimmy Carter was president, you were probably in high school working 3 jobs.
Yes, but I got my 16% for a year. Amazing. I think back at that. My point is, I didn't know what it meant. 16% meant, if it was good or bad.
Yeah, we're getting an overwhelmingly positive response, including some of our contributors who tend to be wealthier, who say to me, gosh, I wish I had had that. I'm still trying to figure out my mortgage payments and some other things. But it's valuable to everybody.
Very, very much so. Congratulations on that and the success of that. I think New Mexico has had tremendous successes with championing full-day kindergarten, which passed the legislature, reducing the tax on food, and getting more of the lottery scholarship money into the scholarships instead of into the cost of running the program. Right. So those are some of your successes. What would you like to share, remind the viewers about Think New Mexico?
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up about the food tax. We actually repealed it, but it's sort of coming back now during this pandemic. Some grocers are taking the position that there's a loophole in the law because we said that consumers shouldn't be charged at the grocery store. And they're saying, well, we're delivering in many cases.
On the curb too.
And,
how about on the curb? Are they charging?
Yes. No, on the curb they can't because then it's still considered the grocery store. But they're arguing that if they deliver to someone's home, that's not at the grocery store. And the people mostly who are having it delivered home are the elderly, the disabled, the immunocompromised, the exact people who we don't want going to the grocery store. So we were able to get a letter from the Tax and Rev Department to the grocers, and we're going to come back in this next session and fix that loophole, which I'm not really convinced is a loophole, but I don't want anybody who's elderly or disabled or immunocompromised to have to pay tax on their groceries again. So some of these fights, Diane, you get them done, but they persist. That was back in 2004, and it seems like every few years, every time there's a budget crisis, people start looking at the food tax revenue as a place to tax again.
Fred Nathan, the Executive Director of Think New Mexico, thanks so much for what you do for the state, what your organization does for the state, and what can the public do to help you?
Well, I'd encourage them to go to our website, Diane, www.thinknewmexico.org, and if they want to get involved in some of these issues like predatory lending, just click on our Action Center, and they can easily contact the governor or legislators with a pre-scripted letter, and we always encourage them to make it personal, rewrite it, and send that in, and that makes a tremendous difference. I've talked to a lot of legislators who really respond to hearing from their constituents. So that's the best thing I think we do is connect people with their elected leaders.
Very good. Thanks again, Fred.
Appreciate
you so much. And come again.
I will.
With your great ideas. Thanks for watching. Make a great week with your family. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater is presented as a public service to New Mexicans by State Employees Credit Union, which has proudly been serving the families in New Mexico locally and abroad since 1958. State Employees Credit Union is ready to help you and your family with all your financial goals and is the exclusive sponsor of Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater in order to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. To comment on today's program or to purchase a DVD copy of any Issues and Answers program, visit sunbroadcasting.org or call us at 505-345-1991.